The video began as most heated celebrity moments do, silent at first. Footage from Essence Fest's Black Women in Music ceremony, recorded just weeks ago in July 2026, shows 5 women standing close for a photograph. Brandy, Monica, Condi Barras, and others, arranged on stage for one of those institutional moments where the industry acknowledges its own. Missy Elliott had just received the Essence Icon Award. The moment should have been purely ceremonial. And then Tamar Braxton appears in the frame, moving toward the group with deliberate intention. Her hand reaches across Monica's body, seeking Candi's. The gesture itself is not aggressive. It is the response that matters. Candi's body tightens. Her face closes. The moment lasts 3 seconds, but the internet knew exactly what it meant. By the following week, this single silent exchange had become a referendum on something larger than 2 singers who shared a stage. It became proof of what neither woman had been willing to fully articulate. This conflict still lived. It had never actually ended. Candi posted to Instagram shortly after the ceremony. "Giving side-eye while keeping it classy," she wrote, confirming what observers suspected. She wasn't being passive. She was being pointed. Within days, the social media responses multiplied. Then came the heavier ammunition. Candi reposted an interview clip featuring Jason Lee's relationship with Tamar. Lee alleged that Braxton had used his platform to attack Candi, and Candi's caption over the video was terse. "Interesting, but I'm supposed to be the mean girl." Yeah, right. Problem with that narrative, that Candi is the villain in this story, had bothered her for years. It was a characterization that had attached itself to her through repetition and through the particular way that success, ambition, and power read differently depending on who wields it. In an industry where women are regularly sorted into categories, Inam and the victim.
Talking to Tamar Braxton, then she's going to have her opinion about me because of the fact that I woke up and realized that
Candi had been assigned a role that preceded her into every room, and she had grown tired of defending herself against a version of herself that existed primarily in other people's interpretations. The foundation of this feud doesn't trace back to a single betrayal or a public insult. It goes back to 2017, to a tour called the Great Escape Tour. The tension between the 2 women stretches back to 2017, when they worked together on the Great Escape Tour, and both have since acknowledged that problems developed behind the scenes due to communication issues and professional disagreements. Escape, the R&B group that made Candi famous in the early 1990s when she was still in her teens, had reunited for a series of performances. The group's legacy was substantial.
That, it's all come to a head.
I don't care. I was at an event, a professional celebration.
They had been platinum-selling artists during the era when R&B dominated radio. They had influenced a generation of female vocal groups, and they had the kind of nostalgic pull that could fill arenas with people who grew up with their music. Tamar Braxton was brought in as an opening act. The shows sold out. The energy was there. But something fractured behind the scenes that no amount of nostalgia could repair. According to Candi's account, tensions developed when Tamar brought out guests during her set. Web personalities and hosts T.S. Madison and Kia had previously made negative comments about Escape members and people close to them. The scenario placed Tamar in a position of choosing allegiance, and her choice signaled something to Candi: a disregard for professional courtesy, an unwillingness to prioritize the tour's cohesion over a moment of personal assertion. For Tamar, the decision may have felt like claiming her own power, asserting that she wouldn't be dictated to about who appeared during her performance. For Candi, it felt like deliberate disrespect. Candi also mentioned that Braxton was upset that she and a few of their mutual friends appeared on The Real as guest co-hosts. The show Tamar was notoriously fired from. This detail matters because it reveals that both women carried separate grievances about perceived slights. Candi saw Tamar as choosing confrontation over professional solidarity. The irony is that both women, by that point in their careers, had learned how to survive in industries built on exactly this kind of maneuvering. They were from the same generation of R&B singers who came up as artists at the same time, during an era when the industry was smaller and the women in it were treated as rivals competing for a fixed amount of space. Just because you become successful, it gets embedded. It becomes the lens through which you interpret other women's actions. A favor becomes an act of exclusion. A networking opportunity becomes evidence that someone else is being chosen over you. Candy's trajectory after the original Xscape era was one of consistent diversification. Born Candy Linese Burris on May 17, 1976, she first gained notice in 1992 as a member of the multi-platinum R&B female vocal group Xscape. But as the industry shifted and groups disbanded, she didn't simply fade into nostalgia. She appeared on television. She built restaurants. She appeared in 6 Real Housewives spin-off and companion series as of 2022, beginning with 2012's The Candy Factory and continuing with various shows, all aired by Bravo. She became a businesswoman in addition to being an artist. This kind of reinvention requires a particular skill set, the ability to read what people want, to position yourself strategically, to know when to be visible and when to recede. Tamar's career, by comparison, has been more volatile. She has experienced both significant success and significant professional exile. She has been fired from opportunities that were considered mainstream platforms. She has had to navigate public perception of her personality, and she has had to rebuild from positions of having been deemed damaged goods by an industry quick to discard women who don't conform to its expectations. These different trajectories matter because they shape how each woman approaches conflict. Candy operates from a position of having figured out how to succeed within existing systems. Tamar operates from a position of having been excluded from those systems and having to create her own. These are fundamentally different postures, and they cannot help but inform how each woman reads the other's actions. By 2019, when they both appeared on Celebrity Big Brother, the unresolved tension had calcified into something resembling genuine hostility. Their strained relationship became even more public during Celebrity Big Brother in 2019, where they openly admitted they were not on good terms, with Tamar accusing Candy of spreading misinformation about her during an episode of the hit reality TV show. This was different from industry shade or professional distance. This was a declaration that the conflict was real, documented, and worth acknowledging in front of millions of viewers. It was also a moment where Tamar was fighting back against a narrative she felt had been constructed about her. In her view, Candy hadn't simply disagreed with her or handled the professional situation poorly. Candy had actively worked to damage her reputation. What remained unresolved after Celebrity Big Brother was what either woman actually wanted from the other. An apology? An explanation? Acknowledgement of hurt? The specifics mattered less than the fact that neither seemed willing to initiate the conversation that might clarify it, and as years passed without resolution, it suggested that the hurt was too deep or the pride too significant for repair. Then, in December 2022, Tamar made an allegation on social media that shifted the narrative entirely. She posted claiming she had been threatened by a Real Housewives of Atlanta couple. When pressed on Watch What Happens Live, host Andy Cohen addressed her allegations about the threats, and after incorrectly guessing other RHOA cast members, to which Braxton sat back and took a sip of her drink, confirming without words who she had been alluding to. She then elaborated in follow-up posts, making clear that the threat had come from Todd Tucker, Candy's husband, and that she viewed his behavior as abusive and disrespectful. She wrote, "It's BEEF, and it's a REALBE, 'cause yo husband stepped to me. Period." And later elaborated, "Obviously it happened. Candy wants to deflect and condone her man's behavior by calling me a victim SMH. It is abusive and disrespectful, and it's nenta step to a WMNN." The allegation moved the conflict from being about two women's professional disagreements to being about personal safety and how partners were allowed to behave. Kandi and Todd have not publicly addressed the feud or any of Braxton's claims directly, instead choosing to ignore the allegations. This silence was strategic. Engaging with Tamar's version of events would require defending Todd's actions or directly contradicting her account. Either move would escalate the situation. By refusing to engage, Kandi essentially declined to participate in the narrative Tamar was constructing. But silence, of course, can read as confirmation or as dismissal, depending on who's interpreting it. In March 2025, Tamar attempted what appeared to be a reset. She told The Breakfast Club that she didn't want to muster up the situation, that the core grievance was being lied on, and that while Kandi calling her a clown had angered her, she wanted to move past it and focus on her own work rather than continue a beef she didn't personally want to claim. It was a graceful retreat, a way of taking the moral high ground by choosing not to fight. It was also a way of suggesting that she had been the bigger person all along, that she had always wanted peace. Kandi did not accept the terms of that retreat. When Tamar told an interviewer named Laurel that she had no beef with anyone, and that greeting Kandi during an event was simply the respectful thing to do, Kandi responded directly in the comments of a post sharing the interview. She wrote, "No beef, but she was just calling me a BT shiech as she walked past me at a party last Saturday. I can't do the fake SHT. The specificity of last Saturday suggested this was recent, that the tensions hadn't diminished, but had merely shifted into spaces the cameras couldn't reach. It also suggested that Kandi had been keeping score, that she had recent evidence that Tamar's claims of moving on were dishonest. What's notable about this exchange is the fundamental disagreement about what had actually happened between them. Tamar was claiming reconciliation. Kandi was claiming deception. Neither woman was lying about her own experience. They were simply occupying completely different realities about the nature of their coexistence. And because their conflict existed largely through public statements and social media, there was no neutral arbiter to determine which version was more accurate. This is where the story becomes less about two celebrities in a feud and more about how women in competitive industries manage accumulated injuries. Kandi has spent decades building businesses, raising children, and maintaining a public persona that balances ambition with likability. She was born on May 17, 1976, and her career has spanned from the early 1990s to the present, including roles as a singer, songwriter, actress, and television personality. She was a housewife, a restaurateur, a television producer, and a voice of authority in spaces where women her age are often made invisible. That visibility comes with a cost. It comes with being criticized more harshly, judged more carefully, and required to perform grace under circumstances where men would be permitted to express anger. Tamar, meanwhile, has navigated a career that has included genuine trauma, public firings, periods of invisibility, and a required reinvention. She has had to convince people that she was worth listening to again after the industry decided she wasn't. She has had to argue for her own humanity against narratives that painted her as difficult, unreasonable, or unstable. That rebuilding requires a different